Took my cake out of the freezer. I put my cookie cutter on top and I pushed it down a little bit. But because the cake was a little bit thicker than the cutter, I had to take a knife and I made sure I kept that blade straight, standing straight up and down, and cut down to the bottom. Now, as you see, I'm having some trouble here. So because I didn't level the cake like I should have, and I have that like really rich film, you know how you get that like really rich top layer on top of your cake, it caused the ear to stick, and I was a little upset because the ear kind of messed up. But as I was doing this and in the process, I said, you know what, I'm just gonna make this the bottom layer and like flip it over, so you'll see what I do with that later on in the video. Then when I moved on to my second one, I made sure that I kept that blade nice and straight up and down along the cutter, and I did not push the cutter all the way in. I just I pushed it in, but I didn't like go all the way down. And again, now the other ear did mess up a little bit, but not as bad as the first one. So you live and you learn. Okay, once everything was cleaned up, I ripped the parchment paper in half. I moved one half of the cake off to the side. I'm just putting a little bit of frosting on the cake, and I put my cake board on and flipped, and there you go. I peeled my parchment paper. Now I'm going to fill it and put my other layer right on top, being very careful. Watch those ears. Those are the weak point in the cake. And then, of course, I'm going to crumb coat and then freeze and then coat it again. And y'all know the drill. Wee! So while that is in the freezer, I rolled out some lavender fondant. And what I'm doing right here is I'm measuring the width of the cutter because I want to make a little cutesy little girl rabbit. So I'm going to put a little bow in her hair. So I figured, I'll do a little lavender bow because the inside of the ears are going to be pink and I didn't want pink on pink. So I decided to do a lavender bow. So you guys know how to make a bow. I just measured it out and just kind of fold it in and fluff it. This is one of my better bows that I've made. I really liked how this bow came out like quite a bit. Once you have your bow shaped, then you cut out the middle piece, and I kind of folded it, and I started folding it the wrong way, and I'm like, Ray, what are you doing? And I put and wrapped it around the middle so it kind of looked like it's got some ruffles, and just put that off to the side to dry. So now I'm gonna actually, since I have the inside cutter like to use, I'm using the inside cutter to cut the little pink speck of his ear. So that's what I'm doing here, and I'm just like straightening the edges and making sure that it's all nice. As you see, I just kind of rub it to make sure that there's no, like the sides are all nice and smoothed down. I'm taking some of that excess fondant and I'm making a little teeny tiny cutesy buddy nose, and I'm just making it into a triangle, but it's like a rounded edge triangle. And what I was doing with the cookie cutter was I was actually just placing it to see if it was a nice size or not. Now these are cool. These are something else from JB Cookie Cutters. These are eyelash cutters, and boom, they pop right out. I suck so bad at eyelashes, and I saw these cutters and I got them in two sizes. This is the smaller size that I have, but they're so good. Oh my goodness. So you just take the little insert and you just push them right out and you are good to go. So what I'm doing here, this is going to be the little mouth, like the little part that comes down from the nose, like you would make on like little, of course, rabbits and cats and stuff like that. So I'm like rolling little sausages, and then what I did was I kind of twisted them together, and then so that way you wouldn't have like a piece kind of hanging off, if you know what I mean. And again, I'm just using this cookie cutter as a reference to make sure it wasn't too big. Do I even need to tell you guys what I'm doing here? Sparkle, glitter, whatever. Yes, I got my pearl dust. I got the lavender, pink, or purple, pink, and black. And I'm making all the little accents sparkle and shine. Come on, it's Easter. You gotta have some sparkle. So now I'm taking my tape measure and I am measuring the perimeter of the cookie cutter because this is going to be the same amount of like distance for the cake. That way I know how long my band needs to be. I did measure the cake in the freezer, so I know how tall my band needs to be. And I just like kind of work it out in sections. I don't really have that big of a counter space, so I just kind of do it as best as I can and just roll it out. I kind of did it like this when I did the pizza too. When I did the pizza crust, I just kind of rolled it out in sections and cut it as I needed to. So now that I have my outer band all rolled out, I'm going to stick the seam in between the ears because you're not really going to see it there. And I'm just rolling my band right around the cake. And then I'm going to take my handy dandy tool and make a seam just like that. Now I did leave the excess fondant on there. And the reason why is because the inner is going to be a little bit smaller than the actual size of the cake. So because I did decide to cut along the outer edge of the cookie cutter. So the inside, when I cut it with fondant for the top piece, is going to be a little bit smaller. So I just wanted to fold it over, and that way there was still a nice clean edge and it didn't look like super crazy. Of course, I'm just trimming the bottom and I'm making sure that it's all nice and flush along with the cake board. So what I'm doing here is I am rolling out my fondant, and this is of course going to be the top piece. Now this is a little tricky because you have those ear inserts. If you want to use them, that's fine. If not, then you don't. If you do want to use them, make sure your fondant's thick enough for the ears to cut out. Mine was thick, but it wasn't as thick, so I had to go ahead and go get my X-Acto knife, and it did make the indentation, so it wasn't actually too bad. And I just went down further and cut the ear parts out. Okay, so I did let my piece sit and like dry for a couple minutes before I put it on my cake because the ears are very fragile. They're very fragile. But then once you get it on there, get it all nice and straight, I've got my pieces and I'm popping the little pink inserts in. If you want to push them down a little bit more, you can. If you wanted to take some cake out, maybe cover it with like fondant on the inside, you can do that as well. I just decided to pop them where they were on the cookie cutter. So now I'm placing my eyes. Of course, I like to move them around and see where I like them before I glue them down with some water. The only thing that sucks about black pearl dust is that it smudges, and I had a few little smudges from it. It's a little bit frustrating. Another thing that you can do too, if you don't like how the outer edge looks when you put the top piece on, you can roll out some rope and like cover it up, or put some flowers, or I was going to put some sprinkles like how I did my Peeps cookies, but I was like, I'm not going to do all that. So I'm now cleaning the board. Let me tell you, vodka can clean a cake board like no other. It will get rid of fingerprints, frosting, powdered sugar, cornstarch. Man, it is a miracle worker. All right, let me tell y'all, this Easter grass right here, this edible Easter grass is just as bad as Easter grass in an Easter basket. It gets everywhere and it makes a mess. I really didn't know how to work with this because, like I said, I've never worked with this before, so this is my first time. I thought maybe it's like, oh well, I'm gonna put some piping gel and I'm gonna use that and that's gonna glue it down. Yeah, let me tell you, this stuff has a mind of its own. It is very stiff and it's kind of like foam. Like at the end of the video I do read the ingredients and stuff, or I will read the ingredients and stuff, but it's kind of like a foam. It's very stiff, it's very coarse, um, it is a little hard to work with, but I just learned as I was going along that just cut it in smaller pieces and just kind of go with it. Again, I was still taking some piping gel and just to get it to stick around the edge, but I'm like, yeah, this stuff's got a mind of its own. I'm just gonna put it on here. Like I said, this cake is just for my family. It's a sugar-free chocolate cake with sugar-free chocolate frosting. So I can pick the fondant off because I want to bake for y'all, but I ain't got nobody to give it to. So for some last finishing touches, I'm just throwing on some of the rabbits that came with the grass, and she is all finished.